Well, I think before we get started, I want to note that the Gosen family will likely not be here next Sunday because they're going to be moving those combines north. They probably should have already been some other places up north, but we've had this rain that comes and goes and comes and goes and high humidity, and we want them to know, want you to know that we are going to miss you greatly as you are going to spend the summer on those combines. And I want all of you to know that Corbin this year is driving. Uh, I don't know if it's dangerous or not. Everybody know what I call Corbin? Wild man. I've been calling him that since he was a little boy. And hopefully he's a little tamer behind the big machine that he drives. But we wish you the best as you spend the summer traveling. Our lesson this morning is easy lesson. And it's a simple lesson. Nothing very profound about it. And yet I really like it. I am drawn to this lesson for maybe a variety of reasons. But one reason is that it seems so applicable to my life. And what I hope is that it's really applicable to all of your lives. In fact, I'm almost certain that it will be. And so may we all be blessed as we contemplate the thoughts of John chapter 12. Only again 3 verses still in John chapter 12. We've been there a long time, haven't we? Verses 27 through 29. And hope everyone who's watching us from a distance also be blessed. I have mentioned this name, I know before, the name of Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey became really famous back in the 1980s when he wrote his first of many books. I think it was titled 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Habit number 2 in his book, which sold 25 million copies. That's why he became a household name in the world of leadership. Habit number 2 said this: begin with the end in mind. Now, that seems like such a simple concept to me. To be able to sell 25 million copies with this being one of the major principles, it seems like such a simple thing. Because if you're going to build a house or a building, you normally have some kind of architectural rendering and you can see exactly what it's going to look like. And then you build plans, and if you follow those plans step by step, then when it's all finished, you have exactly what you thought it would be. And you would begin with the end in mind. And we do that in so many areas of our lives, or at least we should be doing that in so many areas of our lives. We begin with the end in mind. And I could take time and tell you that's how we begin as Christians. When we enter into the kingdom, we have this end in mind of heaven, and we begin over here at the waters of baptism, and we end up over here, and we keep this in mind all the time, and we design, and we operate, and we make decisions with the end in mind. Jesus began his journey with the end in mind. Now, in John chapter 12, yes, we've been there for several weeks. We're about to end John chapter 12. But we have noted that Jesus lived for the first 30 years of his life in a little tiny place called Nazareth. And the first we really learn about Jesus is when he steps away from Nazareth, and we find him there at the Jordan River, and his distant relative named John baptizes him, and he's beginning his public ministry. And even there, at that moment, he was beginning with the end in mind, and he would talk about it from time to time. He would mention it, especially to those men he brought around him, the 12. But they wouldn't understand. But he understood. And by the time we get to John chapter 12 and verse 27, that end is very close. It's very, very close. Now let me ask you this. so we can properly set the stage. Have you ever had something that's going to take place out in the distant time, and you dreaded it? Maybe it's something like a speech that you have to give in 6 months, and you very much dislike giving speeches, but it's 6 months away, and so what you do is you don't think about it very much, but when you do think about it, this sickness feeling comes all over you, and this dread comes all over you, and it happens in many different kinds of settings like that, doesn't it? What happens if your company says you got to pick up and move to a faraway place, and you're going to have to leave this place that you really love, and the date of that moving is going to be in December, and you don't want to think about it, and when you do think about it, you get this feeling, all deep, sick kind of feeling inside. And as it gets closer, you think about it more and more, and you begin to dread it. Now, is everybody understanding what I'm talking about? Have you all had that experience? And you kind of think of what it'd be like for someone who has been sentenced for a crime, and the sentence is execution. And today they do it with lethal injection, but do you remember the days when, at least I was a child, and the way they did it then in the state of Oklahoma with the electric chair? Or earlier than that, how they would do it by hanging. And maybe you sit on death row for 2 years and you live what would be considered a normal life, whatever's normal in that setting. And when you think about it, can you imagine how you would feel? And then you're a week away. Can you imagine how it would feel? And our whole world this week, our whole world has been captivated by the news of a little tiny submarine. Everybody know the little tiny submarine with 5 people on board? And now we know that it imploded because the pressure at 2.5 miles deep is something like 6,000 pounds per square inch. And virtually nothing can stand that. But for a while, we didn't know if they were sitting down there on the ocean floor in darkness, wondering. And we still don't know how much time elapsed between they lost the power and when it actually imploded. Hopefully there was no time. But if there was, can't you feel the dread? Can't you feel the fear? Can't you feel all of that? Well, that's exactly where Jesus is in verse 27 of John chapter 12. So look at his words that he says as we begin to look at this brief few verses. Now my soul is troubled. See, he began with the end in mind. He's known this since the day of his youth. He certainly knew it was coming when he was there at the Jordan River. And what was the end? We've talked about it now several times. It was an end of humiliation. It was an end of pain, beating. And he could visualize the nails that would go into him. And he could visualize hanging there on that cross and dying that slow death of suffocation. He knew exactly what that was. And now it's only but at the most 5 days away. And Jesus has that dread. He has that sickness in his heart. And I know as I speak in this audience this morning, some of you have souls that are troubled. And some who are listening from a distance this morning have souls that are troubled. And it may not be for the same reason. It may not be that you're dreading something. It may be that something else is going on in life, but your soul is troubled. And there's not a person here that doesn't understand that feeling. Am I right about that? Does every single person understand what I'm talking about when Jesus would say, my soul is really, really troubled? I have this weight hanging on me. I have this worry I can't get rid of. I have this concern that will not go away. But I want you to notice the next phrase, because the next phrase is what caught my attention in this lesson and made it so applicable for me. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? You want to translate that in everyday terms, and it's going to sound like this. Shall I quit? Shall I quit? He had that option. He had that option. He could have quit. And it is the number one alternative for everyone in this world who is marching forward with the end in mind. And when the end becomes a little bit difficult, it is the number one alternative. It is the number one choice. We so easily take the choice, I quit. I change. This very week, I completed my 21st, what I call small group meeting. 8 to 10 people. They're free to ask me any question they want to ask. I tell them, you cannot hurt my feelings, you cannot make me flinch. Anything goes. This very week, someone said, why is it in organizations like this one that we so often have this picture of the future and we develop these elaborate plans and we even hire consultants to come in and help us to develop these plans, and somehow we never really execute the plans and we never do anything with it? And I responded and said, that is about the easiest question you could ever answer. And I said, have you ever gone on a diet? A really serious diet? Any of you ever done that? A really serious diet? Where you intend to lose 10 pounds, but no, not just 10, 15 and 20 and 30. And you begin the process, and it is painful. And it's disagreeable. And about the time, here's the way it always works, isn't it? About the time you begin the diet, it's the 4th of July, or it's some other holiday, and there are pies, and there are cakes, and there are cookies, and there are all these things you're not supposed to have on the diet. And you get to going in this, and you say, I don't like this idea. I don't like how this feels. And so you do what? You quit. And I said, in these plans that we have for the future, that organizations build, they require us to make hard decisions. And they require us, therefore, to make difficult decisions that hurt. And they're painful. And sometimes we don't like the pain, and so we just decide it's easier to not do it. We just quit. Now, have you done that? Have you taken the easier route and you just stopped something? I've done it a lot. And the problem is the dream never comes true. The problem is you miss something when you do it. I'll give you an easy one from my life. For several years, I carried a license in the state of Oklahoma called Registered Professional Engineer. It wasn't all that easy to get. When I graduated with a bachelor's degree in engineering, I took an 8-hour exam. You pass the 8-hour exam, you become what's called an engineer in training. You document 4 years of work experience. You go back and you take the professional engineering exam, which is another 8-hour exam. You pass that and you get a license. You get a professional stamp. And I carried it for years. But one day in Lubbock, I got this letter in the mail. It was time for my dues to be paid. And it was time for me to start what they were now instituting in Oklahoma as continuing education. And I thought, how am I going to make trips to Oklahoma City where most of these courses are now offered? And I've been out of engineering so long, I'm not sure I would understand it. And I don't have time to go. I'm so busy. And I made all these excuses, and I dropped the license. And how many times since then have I wanted and even needed that credential? How many times? But I just took the easy way. I just said I quit. And you find people all the time, and we can use the age-old illustrations. We can talk about marriage. If anybody ever tells you that marriage is easy, I won't tell you to slap them, but just tell them they're not telling you the truth, okay? Because it's absolutely hard work. It's hard work. And it can become painful. And what happens now is, because it's so popular and so easy in all these areas of life, not just marriage, it's easy to say, I what? I just quit. I take a different route. I don't want to put up with this. Or where I want to go with life is, it's really nice to get there, but I don't want to do what it requires to do to get there. I quit. And I can't tell you how many people I've intersected with through the years who did have the end in mind of heaven. And something has happened, or several somethings have happened along the way. And they just said, I quit all this. And I can kind of understand that sometimes. And they say, this little assembly stuff, it doesn't amount to much. That preacher's just boring. And besides that, I don't want to do all this. It's countercultural. Yeah, it really is. It really is. Living a life as a Christian is countercultural in terms of the culture of this world. And you know what? It's getting harder every given week. And it becomes so easy to say, I quit. I want to ask you a question. What if Jesus would have done that? What if he would have done that? He could have done that. He could have stopped it all. And you and I would have literally zero hope for life beyond this life, certainly in a place of paradise. Any thought or dream of heaven would be totally gone. And I even found myself wondering this last week, had he quit, would God even have allowed this planet to continue? Because think how painful it would have been from God's point of view, from heaven, to look at all of us continuing to go into degradation, to continue to go deeper into sin, and seeing where we were all headed, how painful that would have been for him. Maybe it would have been better just to stop it all. Burn it all up. But He began with the end in mind, and though it became very difficult, and though his heart, his soul was troubled, and he listed the option, I could quit, he didn't. So listen, look at the next verse. Look at what he said. No, I will not quit. It was for this reason I came to this hour. I began this with this picture in mind. I knew exactly what I was doing when I got into this. I knew how hard it was going to be, and it's feeling a little harder than maybe what I thought, but I'm going to stick with it. This is why I came. And now he says this, and I don't clearly understand what he says next, but look at what he says. Father, glorify your name. And a voice comes from heaven and says, I have glorified it, and I'll glorify it again. And I kind of get this idea that Jesus is saying, Father, let's finish this deal. Father, let's get this done. Father, let's go forward. Glorify your name. I have, and I will again. And the people who are around listening to all this, they hear this voice, and some say that must be thunder, and some say that's got to be the voice of an angel, and Jesus will say to them, he really said this for your benefit, not mine. And that was the truth. Jesus never told anything but the truth. But I wonder how you really felt deep down inside about the words. It's like the Father says, we're going to do it together. I'm really not going to forget you. So look at this last word. When you begin with the end in mind, it's always harder to get there than what you thought. That's just a rule you can write down. That's a rule you can write down. It's always harder than what you thought it would be. Go look at one of those mountains in Colorado and look how gentle that slope looks, and you try to climb it, and it will be harder than what you thought it would be. And you're going to get halfway up, and Greg's going to want to quit on you and go back to the house, and I've got to pull him up the mountain. No, that's not exactly how it worked, but it's close, okay? Because it's always harder than it's supposed to be. In one of those meetings this week, another man spoke up. He's from Kenya. And they started talking about marathons. And they said, have you ever run one? He said, I've run 6. He said, I went to Harding, and I ran track at Harding, and I was an All-American, NCAA All-American. I won about every award you could win. He said, I never intended to run a marathon, but he said, Harding called me years later and said there's going to be this national meet. We're wondering if you would run in it and wear a Harding shirt, because if you happen to win, all the press in America will be focused on you. He said, I ran 6 of them. I won 4 of them. He said, this one they wanted me to run in, they were right. All the press was there. Someone said, how fast did you run that marathon? 26.2 miles. I did a little calculation. Every mile he ran was 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Now that's like running at top speed for most of us, and even topper speed for beyond top speed for most of us. But he said, you know what? The last 2 miles are always the hard ones. And he said, when you begin, you got to begin with the end in mind. You got to begin with understanding the last 2 miles. But you know what else is happening in those last 2 miles? People are lined up everywhere. People are lined up everywhere. You know what they're saying? Great job. Come on, you can do this. You can finish this. Do you know that when Jesus was baptized and he started all this, there was a voice that boomed out of heaven, and God said, This is my son. I'm really pleased with him. Do you know that halfway through the journey, according to Luke's gospel, in Luke chapter 9, when Jesus was, it says, going to set his face toward Jerusalem, when he was going to make that last march and be killed, right before he does that, he goes up on the side of a mountain and he takes with him 3 of those apostles, Peter and James and John. And that's where that strange thing takes place, and all his clothing is turned into bright white. And 2 people from the legendary past come forward. Moses and Elijah come forward. And they're having a conversation with Jesus. Can you imagine the conversation? Moses saying, I spent 40 years in the wilderness. I wanted to quit. And Elijah saying, I dealt with Ahab. He looked everywhere trying to kill me. I wanted to quit. But we didn't. We didn't. And the Father says again from heaven, this is my son. I love him. I'm really well pleased with him. Don't you feel what's happening? Because when you want to quit, you need people around you who say, no, go ahead and finish so the picture can come true. And now here at the end, Father, I'm going to finish this. We're going to finish it. And it's almost like God says, yes, we are. And we're going to do it together. I've glorified my name. I'll glorify it again. Just wait till the resurrection. Just wait till the resurrection and see how this is all going to look. Do all of you see the point of this lesson? Satan sees to it that our souls are troubled. He sees to it. And he's hoping that you and I will reach a point that we're so troubled we just say we quit. But the cheerleaders are saying, keep going. If you want the picture to come true, you got to keep going. And Jesus kept going.